Not my most explosive entrance. Talked to the Marriott about abseiling in through the windows with flashbangs and smoke grenades. I'll be honest, they weren't keen on it. What's my mission today? Well, I'll tell you a bit about some of the adventures I've had along the way, and some of the things I've learned, and some of the things that hopefully will help you along the way, whether it's about teamwork or leadership, uncertainty, resilience, and the use of the debrief. And hopefully there'll be a chance to ask some questions. Unlikely parallels. You might think, why have we got an ex-SES guy in front of us? He's going to tell us about his underwater knife fighting course. What's the parallels? But actually, you'd be surprised. Top one, aims, objectives. We've heard Duncan spoke about that previously. So, that's exactly similar. We have them personally, our own ones, as a team, and then, as a large brigade offensive, we would have them. So from that way, it's exactly the same. We have a reputation of doing things well, as Duncan said, we're the most professional, well-respected Special Forces unit in the world. But that comes with a reputation of doing things well over a period of time, exactly the same as yourself. You don't get that overnight. You earn it, and you have to keep working at it. A lot of people know our motto, who dares wins. Very few people know our ethos. And our first and most important ethos is the continuing and unrelenting pursuit of excellence. We have to keep working at it. We can't just say, work yesterday, work tomorrow. We have to keep working at it, constantly improving. One of the worst things I've heard is, well, that's just the way we've always done it. And Duncan alluded to that. Working small teams or large, I can be on my own and hiding somewhere in a derelict for a couple of weeks on a sniper task, or be part of a small team or a brigade offensive, so that's exactly the same. We're male dominated in the SES, and this year's the first year we've opened it up to females, but being in a male dominated environment creates its own challenges. And there's things we're really good at as guys, but there's things we're also not so good at, and that's why we struggle sometimes with a lot of things, and that's why you see a lot of issues coming out now. So whether they're different things you have going on in the team dynamics, they're hard to when you measure it against the mission, they're quite hard to come up against. Specialists and generalists, you might be surprised to know that we're seen as generalists within the SES. We're not specialists. So we do a lot of our things in a short space of time. So as medics, demolitions, linguists, we'll spend 6 to 8 weeks learning that trade, that skill, and then we'll pick up a new one. Unlike our American counterparts, the D14 Alphas, they'll do a med course for 18 months, and they can do everything from deliver babies to make tropical medicine. For us, we want to learn the skill, intensive trauma, and we move on to the next skill. Because we want as many different people to have as many different skills, because if someone drops out, we want to be able to step into their shoes. Failure is not an option. You won't be surprised to hear that. We can't fail at what we do. What you might be surprised to hear is that we fail all the time, constantly. We're brave to fail. The difference is we fail in a training environment. So we'll try things knowing they're probably going to fail, but we try them. We're brave. We'll just constantly try new things. So when it comes to that day of the races, that time in the arena, we know we're going to succeed. And if you think about it, that's similar to any other sports team or athlete. That amount of time you spend training compared to the time that you're in the ring, on the track, is exactly the same. So we're no different. Communication, absolutely key. And listening's a big part of that, particularly in hostage negotiations. But we all come from different backgrounds, different ranks, but we're all team members with something to offer. So listening and getting everybody's 2 pence worth gives the commander the best chances of getting the right ingredients to get the job done. Everyone's a leader. I don't mean everybody's the boss, everyone's the managing director. Everybody has to think like a leader. Everybody has to think at least 1, possibly 2 rungs up. And everybody has to think like that for obvious reasons for us. But that helps generally. That helps in any organisation. If you know what the plan is and where you're all headed to, all paths lead to Rome. And for us, we have to do that. We're one of the few special forces in the world that recruits from RAF, Army, Navy, Territorials, and this year, women. We have a women on selection now. And we want that. We embrace that. Because we want 6 different members within our team. Just like yourselves, all come from different backgrounds, perhaps different subunits. As an organisation, all have very different experiences, background. You have something very unique to offer. And for us, we want that. And again, that's sometimes unlike our American counterparts. It's unlike our SBS that recruit just from the Marines. We want 6 very different people. We want a demolition, a linguist, an engineer, a paratrooper. We want them all in there because they all have something very different to offer. Adapt or die to your environment. Glad to know you're not going to die if you don't adapt to your environment. We have to adapt to ours. But not only do we have to adapt to it, we have to be better in that environment than the people we're up against. And we've always had to do that. We go to the desert, we're the desert rats. We go to the jungle, we're the chindits. When I first went to Hereford, we had 2 liaison guys in London. By the time I left, we had 6 teams. And those guys might be sitting outside a mosque with an earpiece in with a little bag as a homeless person doing commentary. 10, 15 minutes later, they'll be chasing someone through Canary Wharf in a designer suit, and they'll be trying to interrogate their phone or tablet. That's how we've had to adapt quicker, but quicker than the people that we're up against. That's the same for you in terms of competitors, having to constantly adapt. That goes hand in hand with technology. You win the technology battle, generally you win the war, but there's other things you'll have to your armament that'll help. Who am I? Whenever I get asked that question, I always think back to this day. I was shut in a room. It was locked from the outside, and I couldn't get out. I was quite badly beaten. I had a fractured eye socket, couldn't open my right eye, and there was a window up in the top corner of the room. And every time I tried to get to the window to look outside, guy would come in from outside. He would do me in again, and this went on for about 3 days. My meals were brought in on trays. Whenever I tell people that, they say, well, you're trained for that in the SES. You train for a bit of, rough and tumble. But actually, the opposite's true. This would train me up for a life in the army and later on Special Forces. I was only 13, 14 years old. NSPCC, we're in and out the house, supervision orders, children's panels and stuff like that. There's a lot of positives that came from it. From a very early age, I was able to separate the mental and the physical and how they complemented each other. So physically, I could get broken down. I'm just like you. You bash me, I'll bleed, my bones will break like everybody else. But mentally, I was the gatekeeper of my emotion. And by that, I meant I held the key to decide whether you could make me sad or angry or scared or happy. Nobody could make that. They could try and influence it, but ultimately it was me that turned the key. And I got battered yesterday, I'd be here today, I'd probably get battered today, but I'd be here tomorrow, and eventually I'd be 16 and I'd be able to leave. And that's exactly what happened. This is my school photograph, and what I normally do is I get you to try and pick me out, and if they give me a laser that works, they've stopped giving me lasers now. I point them at people and they end up dead. But I've got a laser today, so I'm going to point to someone in the school photograph, and if you think it's me, I just want you to shout out, all right? Yeah, that gets a lot of votes. So that's red tights and a skirt. So my childhood was bad. It wasn't weird. That a lot of people. I think people look for the saddest looking person in the school photograph after I give them a little talk. This is me up here, and most bad things that could happen to a kid happened to me. But the biggest crime's that jumper right there. That's horrific. That was never in fashion. I like this quote: "Your perspective in life comes from the cage you were held captive in." And I'd be glad to know I've never held captive in a cage. But your outlook on life, the glasses through which you see the world, are formed as a product of your environment. So as you grow up, that's your mum, dad, brothers, sisters, you go through school, in the workplace, people that you see, you look up to, people that you don't so much, good managers, bad managers, things you see on television, you read in magazines, and that forms our kind of instant judgments that we make, the things that we look at, and we form our own opinions on what we do. And exactly, this was it for me. This was the environment I was in. And sometimes we don't know an environment's bad or not normal or different until we're out of that environment. And then we have something to compare it to. So I didn't really know this was any different to any other environment until I was out of it. And recently in Scotland, we've started to looking at the laws of smacking children. And we're going to stop it. And I think years from now, maybe we'll look back and we'll think, you used to smack children? Like that was a thing? You would inflict violence on a child, and that would teach them what's right and wrong. And I think, well, I was battered, and in some ways you think, well, I grew from that and I learned from it. A lot of people say that we're smacked, but I often think, what kind of message is that? And maybe years from now we'll look back and think, inflicting violence on children, that's a normal thing. So I do a lot of work with NSPCC at the minute, but a lot of it's done behind closed doors. There was no convictions in my case. Environment. You want to create an environment that gives you the best chance of success. So you want to surround yourself with ambitious, driven, motivated, like-minded people that are on the same pathway as you. And you'll see people in the workplace, in the workstations, they've got positive slogans and mottos around, and they help. But if you think about the opposite's true. Have you ever had that friend that's really negative, just likes a good wine, comes along, whines to you for an hour, and by the time they leave, you're as depressed as them. You're right down in the... And so the opposite's true. So we want to surround ourselves with that, and we have that in Special Forces. But that's what you want around you. You want a team of people that are all on track. Because if you dip slightly, they're there just to push you on and help. You want to create many different facilities and platforms through which to share success. And even when you don't do things well, there are things we don't do well, but we have facilities through which to share it. There's no point one person in the room doing their job really well and not sharing it. We need as many different platforms as possible. So whether that's an online portal, it's weekly meetings, it's post-its on a board, whatever it is, the amount of different platforms you have, the more chance you have of sharing success, and even when you don't do things as well. Don't be afraid to ask for support. There will be stacks of experience around you. Ask for it. Ask for help. Know where to go and get it. It's not a sign of weakness. We know that in the SES we can't do everything. We constantly have to go and get technical help, expertise, ask for help here and there. We're not afraid to. It's seen as a sign of strength. So we're not afraid of that. I was a soldier at 15. I won't get you to point me out who you did so well the last time, but I had to grow up quite quick. And this became like a family for me. And the people left and right of me cared about my physical and mental well-being. And that was something I was quite alien to at first, quite suspicious of. Over the course of a year, I learned to embrace it. I had to get special permission to join the army at 15. My mum wrote me a letter to say if I didn't join the army, I'd be homeless. I never spoke to my parents again. So this is my first family that I had around me, and I grew to love it. There's something great about the military. The people left and right of you leaning on each other for support. Because you go through hard times and you go through happy times as well. This was army life. It wasn't all spent topless. I just like putting some of these pictures up there. I learned my trade in Northern Ireland, a great learning ground for a young soldier, because at the centre of the conflict was people. People were at the centre of it, and I think that stood the British military in good stead for wherever they've went, because you can have all the weapon systems, more people, and force your will, but actually at the centre of it's people. And if you change attitudes and minds and speak to people, that's far more important than any weapon systems or anything you have. You'll see that in your workplace. You can have all the greatest things in the world to sell, but it's people at the heart of your success. So I enjoyed it. This was a great stomping ground for me. Many tours of Northern Ireland. The top one was the Queen's Butcher, or Larderman, as it was titled, which doesn't sound like the next Marvel superhero. I went away and did a butchery course, and then that was me. I was put in the Queen's estate, and everybody else was out guarding the palace and stuff. I loved it. You know, the Queen and the family would just come in and out the butchery constantly and just shoot the shit with me, and just it was quite surreal. You know, as a young, I'd only be like 19 years old, to be able to just sit and speak to them was quite surreal. And I was fortunate back at that time. It wasn't the days of mobile phones, selfie brigades, Instagram. And sometimes we're guilty of that when we have these moments, and you'll have them. Some of you will have had them already. Sometimes we're guilty of wanting to capture it on a device, a mobile, rather than use our senses, because it's part of our DNA. That's what makes up our life. Those moments and experiences that we have. So I was quite fortunate. I managed to dance with Lady Diana at the Gillies Ball and stuff. So they're memories I'll take with me. Bottom one's Edinburgh Castle and public duties, and that's where I first got the sense of the difference between the public and private profiles, both of the royal family and the military, in terms of what the public see and what goes on behind closed doors and how this little family operates. I was in Northern Ireland one evening. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. I was there with 3 other guys, and hiding in a bush looking at things. It wasn't in my spare time, it was in the military. And these 2 tall, dark, bearded, handsome strangers crawled in. Said, "Right, kid, we'll take it from here. We're the SES." And I thought, right, there's a whole nother level here. You know, there's a Premier League going on. Much like in Scotland, we look down and we look at the Premier League and we think it's just like. And I thought, wow, I just want to aspire to be that. You know, I want to test myself at that level. I just want to be the best version of myself. So without really knowing what I was doing, I put my papers in for selection. It's a voluntary thing, and signed up for SES selection because I knew I wanted to be part of this. Selection 6 months long. There's 2 of them a year, approximately 200 people on each selection. And we've heard about, hiring talent and then training the skills, and selection's exactly like that. The start of my selection, there was 196 people, and at the end of my selection, there was only 12, 6 months later. I never thought I was at the front or the back of selection. I always felt I was somewhere in the middle. I was middle of the pack somewhere, just trying to just keep up day by day. It just so happened at the end there was 12, and I still felt I was in the middle. Didn't feel I was at the front or necessarily the back. It has so many different things on selection, as many different phases, but the one key thing that's at the heart of it all is mental resilience. When I look about at the other 11 guys that finished with me, there was one common factor. We weren't physically, anything to look at. He passed us in the street, not give us a second look, but mental resilience was a key part of that. And I think that's important. The first day when I walked into the cookhouse, there was 196 people. As I looked around, the bodybuilders, marathon runners, guys far higher in rank than me, far stronger and bigger. And I think if I was to measure myself against any of them individually, I'd come up short. And I think it's important we don't do that. We don't measure ourselves against anybody. We don't compare ourselves to anybody else. We're the measure, ultimately. We do the best we can be. That's always the measure, ultimately, ever. That's always the measure, and that's all I ever did. I took one day at a time and just wanted to get there. And anybody that's climbed Everest or run a marathon, it's about 1 foot in front of the other. You just keep going, and ultimately that's what it was. That's what it was like for me. This was me at the end of selection, next to the famous clock tower in Hereford. We had the Pilgrim's Master poem, James Elroy Flecker, written on it. And it has the names of everybody we've ever lost in the regiment written on the clock tower. So a very poignant moment for me at the end of that 6 months, being one of only 12 people. I've talked about being the measure and one day at a time. You've also got to visualise what the end goal means. So if you're faced with any project, you've got a goal in mind. Even if you're training for a marathon, you're trying to lose weight, whatever it is, it's about visualising what the end goal is and then making small goals and smashing them. And we've heard Duncan talk before about setting these high bars, and that's what we do. We start with bars here and we work away at them, chip at them until they're high and we're smashing them, and that builds our mental resilience. That builds our motivation. We see what we can achieve because it becomes reachable. Something that's a year off or you can't really see it. But when you set these goals and you smash them, suddenly it becomes attainable and we know we can reach it. And that's what selection's all about. I was on selection with paratroopers, and it was the first time I'd ever parachuted. Now on paper, these guys were far out trumped me. When it come to the jungle, I went to the jungle. First time I'd ever been to the jungle, and I went there with jungle warfare instructors. Now at the end of the day, when there was only us that were finished at the finish line, jungle warfare instructors weren't there. So it wasn't about the skill set they had or where they'd come from. It was about a whole load of other things, whether it was mental resilience, team player, attitude, determination. Those were things that were far more important. And certainly at the end of the day, when we have those 12 people that have passed, we know they have the potential. We can send them anywhere, and they have. We can train and do all that stuff. That's fine. We know they're going to pick it up. It's the mental resilience piece. Got to make it enjoyable. We're all human beings. As I say in Scotland, we're all Jock Thompson's bairns. There's no point slogging our brains out for 90 years and dropping dead. It's got to be enjoyable because we're human beings. So we make it enjoyable, we set goals, we compete against each other, and that makes it fun and enjoyable. This everybody's a winner thing that we have going on at the minute, that can be unhealthy sometimes. Many goals I've talked about, but learning from around you. There'll be a lot of experience just in this room. So it's learning from people around you. I learned when I was on selection. It's people that knew what selection was about. They knew the phases, they'd been to the jungle, they'd jumped out of planes, they'd fired certain weapon systems. I just learned from around them. I knew if I failed, I was going back to being topless of the Queen's Butcher. So I just learned all those trades from you. And that makes yourself valuable. You want to be the person in the room, someone's coming asking for advice. How do you do this? Have you had this problem before? Not the person that's constantly asking. I was still riding the euphoria of having passed selection. I was only 3 months into the job, had my blue belt, my beige beret, and I was only halfway through my counter-terrorist training. I was only 23 on selection. I was probably only about 24 by this time. And they gave me a pager, shows how long ago it was. And they said, Colin, you're on the UK counter-terrorist team, so there's a pager. If it goes off 4 nines, that's a counter-terrorist incident. You need to react to it. I was like, right, okay. And they sent me on this forward air controllers course. It's brilliant. You got a shot of flying a jet and pointing lasers at targets and blowing them up. It was great fun. And I was up in the back of this jet, and my pager went off. I said, you're going to have to take it down. So they came down. I phoned up Exchange, and I was like, hi there, it's Colin, the new guy. My pagers just went off, and it's 4 nines, or it's 4 sixes upside down, I don't know. And they said, no, it's 4 nines. It's a hijacked jet. It's coming into Stansted, and you're the closest one there, so get there and hold the fort. I was like, what? They're like, get there and hold the fort. I was like, okay. So I got on my black kit and I chucked it on my Darth Vader kit in the back of the Range Rover and I hightail into Stansted. And as I get there, there's a massive crowd round Stansted. Chief Super's there. He's trying to keep crowds at bay. He's got police cordon round there. And he's looking at me as I'm coming in. He's trying to see behind me and he's like, where's the rest of them? I'm like, yeah, I'm in the advance party. They're just coming. He's like, right, okay, get in the main hangar and give the guys a brief in 10 minutes. I was like, yeah, will do. Give the guys a brief in 10 minutes? I'm 24, I've been here 3 months. What am I going to brief them on? And sometimes life's like that. They'll just take you and just drop you right in at the deep end. Sink or swim, all been there. So this was my sink or swim moment. I think, right, okay, there's only 2 ways this can go. I can either kind of tiptoe out there and go, guys, don't know if you know, I'm only 24, I'm only 3 months in the job, so if you point me in the way of the coffee machine and you guys deal with it, I thought that's not going to fly. I'm going to have to let them know, enthuse confidence, let them know the SAS are here and we've got this. So I thought, right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my kit on. There's something about putting the black kit on. I've got my little hand cannon strapped to my side and I just feel about 1.5 inches taller and I come out into this hangar, 200 people in there, Cobra intelligence services, listening, police, press, all there, 200 of them all looking at me apprehensively, much as you're looking at me now. I come out into this stage and I'm like, right, guys, let's confirm the make and model of this aircraft. When it comes in, direct it over the tunnel so we can get underneath. Let's cut the steering so they can't go anywhere. Let's drain all engine fluid out of there. Let's get transmissions on there. Let's speak to the pilot, see how many passengers, how many terrorists, what their arms and demands are. Let's keep the press at bay. You all know your jobs. Go, go, go. And everyone went flying out different corners of the hangar and I was like, I was like, when are you guys coming? For like 40 minutes. And this is me at the back of the plane, just hoping that for 40 minutes nothing's going to happen. I'm going to have to single-handedly storm the plane and probably mess it all up. But actually, this is one of the longest UK counter-terrorist sieges in history. This went on over 4 days. And yeah, people like to tell all the bombs and bullets, you know, I stormed the machine gun nest and I took 2 in the chest. But I quite like telling the funny stories of what not a lot of people know. And the funny times are what get us through these kind of grim, hard work times. And at this particular period, they were wondering about how to get eyes and ears onto the plane to tell what was going on. And they said, Colin, we've got this phone. We're going to give it to you and you put the phone on the plane so we can speak to them. And when they lift the handset, it's going to operate a camera. We're going to see everything on the plane. I was like, James Bond stuff. So they gave me this phone and it was like something from the First World War. It was like this size with about 1 kilometre of cable. So I walk out to the plane, I chap on the door and they open the door and I put this phone up. And then they shut the door and it cuts the cable. I was like, that's not going to fly. So I go back and I'm like, that's not what they said. Right. They've asked for food on the plane. So what we're going to do is we're going to put pizzas on the plane. And in those pizza boxes, those little trays that stop the pizzas collapsing, those are going to be listening devices. We'll hear everything on the plane. I was like, okay, we're back in, Domino's jacket, pizzas, and I go out to this plane, I chap on there. I put all these pizzas on, door closes. I literally get about 4 steps and the door opens, all these pizzas come flying out all over the tarmac. Ham and pineapple. Like, they're not going to eat that. So I go back and I'm like, that's not worked. So they're like, okay. Every couple of hours we're going to dial into the cockpit and we're going to speak to the pilot. He's going to tell us how many passengers there are, any injuries, elderly kids it needs off, what the terrorists are, what their weapons are. And that worked as long as the end of the first night. And then the pilot tried to escape and he jumped out the window, broke his leg and we had to drag him away. That was it. We had no eyes and ears on the plane. Stalemate, back and forth, rumbling on for 4 days and 4 nights, just trying to release one person, marginal gains, just trying to get somebody off. Nothing. Everybody's quite tired, back and forth. And at the back of the plane, one of the snipers, Jim, he comes on the radio and he says, that's a body on the tarmac. Now for us, one person killed, we're going to storm the plane. Those were the aims. So we get our kit on, we're in the Range Rovers, we're all in a straight line, the hangar doors are opening, we're all looking at each other, we know the plan, and we go flying out the hangar. Can see the plane now, 400 yards, 300 yards, we're 200 yards away. I can see people's faces through the windows of the plane. And then Jim comes on the radio and he says, and that's the body stood up. And we're on the plane. So I don't know whether they looked out the windows and saw this, but they put the steps down and just released everybody. So we managed to capture all the hostages alive and capture all the hostage takers as well. Although I heard recently that one of them's now working as security at Heathrow. So silver linings and all that. Anyway, that was Stansted Airport. Massive success.